Okay, book signings and book events. How do they work if you do not know? If you have not been to one before, this is the video you need to kind of break this down for you. Is this entirely inclusive? No, there is a lot of other things that we can be sharing with you, but this is the basics, the main knowledge that you need to then move forward, learn on your own, and if you want a deeper in-depth video, we can do that as well. So when it comes to book signings, the first thing you need to know is that almost all of them require you to pay to be there. That is how it works. These places sell tables and half tables for you to then come set up and sell your books to people. Unless you are the most famous of famous authors, you are not going to be invited and given a table. That is reserved for people who are such big names that they will have people coming in droves to meet them. Unless you are that kind of a draw, you will have to pay for your table in almost every case. And so with that in mind, you have to understand that you're going to get a full table or a half table. Now, this typically is a long table that you set up. Sometimes there are tablecloths, sometimes there are not. Sometimes you have a booth space, sometimes it's literally just tape on the floor and they say don't infringe on someone else's space. So you will have to decide if you want a full table or a half table. If you only have a few books, a half table is probably fine. If you do not want to spend a ton of money, a half table is probably fine, but do not bring a ton of things to put on your table. You're not going to sell all your stuff. If you only have a half table, pick your top titles and bring those. You can have other things and tuck them under the table, but you're not going to have the space to display everything unless you're very creative in how you're displaying them. Full tables are usually pretty good for people with more books, but they definitely cost twice the amount. I personally prefer to have the whole table just because I have a lot of things that I sell. I make a lot of stuff that displays what I've got going on, and I like the space because I typically have a pretty long line that shows up for my book signings. And so I want to have that space that encroaching on other people's signing space. It is important to note that when you are at a book signing, you are limited to the space you purchased. You cannot really go outside of that into other people's territories. So if you want to stand in front of your table, as well you should, but that's another conversation, you need to make sure you're not standing in front of the person next to you. You have to stand in front of your table, or you have to stand behind your table. You are not taking up their space. When you have a line of people that are showing up to get signed copies of your books, make sure that they are not blocking other people's tables. Now, I will say this much. I have done a lot of book signings in my day, and it tends to ebb and flow with the number of people that come up for signings. So if you are relatively known, if people have read your books before, you're probably going to get people coming in. They'll probably travel in. I've had people drive in from long distances. I've had people fly in. I've had people fly across oceans to meet me. And it always comes in like feast and famine moments during your signings. You will have times when there's nobody in front of your table. And then you will have times when everyone is in front of your table. On occasion, you will have them spaced out. You'll get them in a nice little flow so that you have time to talk to everybody and everything's good and you've got some space and you've got a little chance to breathe. It moves along nicely. But in a lot of cases, for a lot of people, you're going to have a long line all at once. They all show up at the same time. And it's just how it works in a lot of cases. And sometimes you will have space where there aren't any people. And that's kind of a nice time to take your little break. Now, you want to make sure that you are bringing enough things to kind of cover your space. So again, some places have tablecloths and they mandate you use them. Some people have them and they're accessible to you. Some people have them and you can kind of cover them up. Some people don't have them at all. So you need to ask questions when you sign on for a book signing. When you are signing up, you need to understand the expectations. And a lot of times the people who are putting on these events don't tell you. Like, it's not on the website. It's not on the information they send you. You show up and some people, if they've been there before, know the expectations. Other people do not. I once went to a book signing where nobody told me anything. No one told me anything. So I showed up and I had some nice little like displays and things and it was fine. But I get there and my friend who had been there multiple times before and didn't bother to tell me says, "Oh, what did you bring to decorate? What's the stuff?" And I said, "Well, I flew in on a plane. I didn't really bring too much. I have my banners." And she's like, No. This is one where the gaudier, the better. Like, people are expecting lights and flashing things and just like stuff all over your tables. Nobody told me. So you have to ask questions in the Facebook groups connected to these events. You can ask the people running them. You can ask other people who have been there in the past. Understand going into it what you're going to need, and then kind of facilitate that with how you're traveling in. So if you're driving in, you can bring whatever you need. You have a car. If you're flying in, you might want to ship some things, or you might want to get creative in how you do it. I showed up to that particular book signing and I had to, out of thin air, create decorations. And thank goodness I am known for I'm known for creating newspaper dresses around models to represent different book characters. And so newspaper, anything, very easy for me to create massive things out of. And so I grabbed a free newspaper from the hotel lobby and I built all these really cool flowers that I put all over my table to kind of level it up. It didn't quite rival it because I didn't, I had 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to rock this out. But people took notice and everybody stopped to talk about it. And so you have to know going in what the expectations are. And more often than not, they don't tell you. And you have to do the investigating on your own. You do need to bring copies of your books. You're responsible for these. You have to understand how many books you're going to sell. Now, it is important to know, for the most part, for most people, book signings, book events are not for profitability. They are for marketing. You will probably not, for most people, unless you're very well known and people are coming from out of state to see you, for most people, you're not going to make back what you paid for the table, full or half. And that's okay. You have to have paperwork with you that people can take, because most people come to these signings and they have a set amount of money that they can spend and they can't spend over it. And they go to their favorite authors first. By the time they get to you, I'll come back later. I'll look it up on Amazon later. So you want to have paperwork that goes with you for this. You need to have printed postcards and bookmarks and things with your books on them, or your blurbs on them, or your Facebook, or your social media, your Instagram, your TikTok, your YouTube, things that they can find you with. QR codes, amazing. You want to make sure that you have things that they can just take. Not things they're paying for, things they can just take to look you up later to make it easy for you to make these sales. You also want to be having sales on your book. So don't just charge normal rates, do bundle rates. If you buy 3 of my books, or if you buy the omnibus, you get the free thing with it, or you get a little bit of money off. Have some kind of draw that makes it really good and hard to pass up with them leaving and looking at it later. So if you have something that is going to work really, really well for them to buy right now, they're more likely to buy it right now if it's going to save them some money or get them some kind of bonus content. So you want to make sure that you are prepared for these events, and you want to make sure you know who you're working with. So if you have a half table, understand who's going to be next to you. They usually give you that name in advance so you can kind of link up and see, what can we do? What kind of crossover things can we do? How can we help each other? I highly recommend that you understand who is next to you and who is in your row and who is in your space. So when you are there, you can help market them. If you are shouting out other authors to the people who are coming up to you, they're going to shout you out as well and help everybody to make more sales. And so you really, really, really need to take the time before people come in to know who's around you. So that if somebody comes up and says, oh, I really like the steampunk book that you wrote, you could say, oh, well, the person right behind me writes steampunk. You might like that one as well. Shout out the people. They'll shout you out back. Book signings are a lot of fun, but you also are responsible for bringing your things to sign. Sharpies, pens, all the things, money, your money box, any card readers that you have, you're responsible for everything. They are literally, when you buy into your table, handing you a table, maybe a tablecloth. And you actually have to make sure that you're aware of the space that you're allowed to use. So some people in some locations, if you have a full table, you can just say, I don't want the table, and create another display behind you. You can put up banners, you can do all sorts of things, but you have to ask questions first. Because if you plan on coming in and setting up some poles and putting some garland up and creating like a little canopy for yourself, and they say no when you get there, that's going to be a problem. So you have to make sure you're doing your research. When it comes to book signings, really, really fun. You're not going to make a lot of money that day. You might make a lot of money on the back end when people go to Amazon later. And if you do as well, if you are marketing well, if people know you, if they're aware of who you are, you can be profitable at these events and have people coming in specifically to purchase those books. I also recommend doing pre-orders. So if you are going to be somewhere and you can set up a pre-order, have people buy them in advance. That way they can put it through on their cards. It's ready to go. It's not part of the money that they're spending while they're there because they've already spent it. They're simply going to pick it up, and then you know how many to order. So you don't want to have a big, huge bulk of all of your books if you have 20 books and then not sell them all. So know your best sellers, know what's going to sell well. I recommend having a good amount of the first book in a series, so like 5 or 6 copies of that, and then 1 copy of each or 2 copies of the follow-up books, because not everybody's going to buy for the full series. If you have an omnibus, bring those as well. You want to make sure that you are testing and ask questions. So if you have questions about how many books you should be bringing based on how many books you've written and what genres and what event you're going to, feel free to ask me. I'm more than happy to help you, but we are getting up on time with this video. So while there's a lot more that I can show you about book signings, I want to make sure we're getting your questions answered. So drop your questions down below. Maybe we'll do a follow-up on this one so that I can help you with those questions and guide you along on this process. But we want to make sure that you are ready to go for this. So you're buying your table, you are bringing the decorations, know who you're working with, shout each other out. Make sure you have all of your supplies with you and know you're going into this as a form of marketing, not necessarily a form of making a profit. And understand a lot of those sales are coming on the back end of this as well. Drop your questions on book signings down below. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes because we're going to do some follow-ups. There's so much that I can share with you. And we're dropping daily videos to help you navigate the world of your writing, from your writing to your marketing to your publishing, to make sure this is your most profitable year ever with the least amount of stress and overwhelm and time commitment on your content creation. We'll see you then.